Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. All right, welcome back to the Ranchonomics Podcast. I'm here again with Amos Troester. So, Amos, we're going to try to pick up where we left off. We were talking about sort of how the fact that the added grazing that I get after a crop is basically, free gravy kind of thing. We agree there is nothing free in life. But when we add additional gross product to the same field for very little cost, it has a massive impact on profitability. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very good.
There's extra benefits all around for that. You bet.
So let's talk about the size of how deep is the gravy? What does that actually look like in numbers terms?
Well, so when we look at, again, that multi-species after the small grain, that let's just call it 35 cent pound of gain. When you could put that gain on, and like I said, when you trade these cattle or whatever, but you look at the value gain and what you're getting paid for that gain to be put onto that. I mean, there's cases, where you can get paid $1.50 to $4 or better. So that's a pretty heck of a return, John, when you start looking at that concept. And then behind it, you follow that with a summer annual and we carry these cows because you got so much biomass that you can mass stock these acres, and we'll carry these cows for 85 cents a day kind of deal, and with their calves. And when we look at the whole numbers of it all compared to your perennial pastures, and there's a place for perennial pastures. Don't get me wrong, there's land that's got to be left alone. But to grow, and
you've got a bunch of it around you in that driftless country, right? I mean, you have some steep country that flows down to the river, right?
We do. Yeah, we absolutely do. And there's quite a bit of it around, and truthfully probably should be some more. But as of today, you look at that high biomass compared to the perennial grass, your perennial grass actually costs you about probably 50 to 75 cents more a day to carry a cow. Just surely because you just don't have the amount of biomass there to graze.
And you also don't have the quality during some of the harder parts of the year, right?
That's 100% correct. In this country here, we got a lot of cool season grasses. We use a lot of orchard grass and, perennial ryegrass, a little bit of fescue and some timothy and stuff like that. We get into that summer slump and we drop off. Boy, we can take a group of cattle backwards if we're overstocked really quick. But my favorite system, John, is if you're a business or you're an operation where you have a pasture that sits right here and right across the fence line, you have tillable land. And there's a lot of these situations out there. That would be where I would really recommend people to start with this, because the rest period that we can give that perennial when it needs it the most is so critical. And what they're going to find out when they do that is you're going to increase your carrying capacity of these acres over here in this perennial because you're moving them off for 30, 45 days. This depends on how you design it, But to open a gate and move them across and turn them on something that's better palatability, higher palatability, just surely more grazability out there for that dry time of the year. What a fantastic way to just be able to increase overall. I mean, if we can increase our carrying capacity by 10%, what does that do to our bottom line? I mean, 10% is not much, but it's a big deal at the end of the day.
And again, it's 10% that happens after all of your costs are covered, right? After everything is, you've been charged. The cost doesn't really go up, and you still add 10%, right?
Yeah. We're adding.
There are a few costs, but not very many.
No, I mean, we're adding. You can go check. I've heard you say it 100 of times. I mean, if you go check 10 cows, you might as well check 50 cows. It's not like it takes you any more time to check 50 cows versus 10, or in your country, you got, 500 to 1,000. I mean, maybe a little bit more, but nothing significant that's going to draw on that bottom line. So if we can increase that carrying capacity and get that 10% or maybe even more, I mean, we've seen it more than that, up to even a 30%.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk about kind of the progression from, again, zero cover crop to then forage crop. When we, kind of go all in on just growing forage and grazing all of it. If you look at that through time, one, I think you can move back and forth between them, but are there ways to kind of play that based on the markets and where things are at, and give us an idea where things are at right now?
So, like we've talked before, the foundation of, I think the biggest fear in this is fence. When I look at a business and I look at a row crop business, well, I'm not picking on the row crop guy, but let's look at the row crop business. They're doing a cover crop. Maybe they went from a conventional test system or whatever. Now they're doing a cover crop, right? How do we get that acre, get the opportunity built into that acre to now do the grazing system or, do the summer annuals or whatever the case may be. And I think the biggest holdup in a lot of that is fence. It truly is a structure. We got the e-collars coming on board. They're starting to be very widespread, I guess, more and more every year, it seems like. What a way to do that. If a guy could integrate a cover crop, and in this country, there's not a lot of grazing cover crops in fall because we're so far north. The opportune way to do that, to graze a fall cover crop here, is really to grow small grain. It just truly is. We've done some interseeding on corn, but the herbicide programs kind of change that a little bit and what's allowed and what's not. It's hard that way. But you got to change that entire system really to get that fall graze. But to change that acre from that, just a simple cover crop now to something that we can generate revenue from, I would have no problem offering somebody to the likes of $25 to $50 an acre to come out and graze cattle. And I'm not saying put a detriment on their land. I'm saying just utilize that acre to, graze some calves or whatever. But when we look at that and we look at the sheer tiny margins that are in this, these row crops today, and we talked about it, on the last segment there, it's just extremely tight. So even if you had somebody, a neighbor or somebody down the road that wanted to bring those cattle in or something to graze on that cover and generate another $50 an acre, say that, what a way to affect your bottom line. I mean, does it get us whole? Does it get us a positive? It's a help, and it's also a big impact to the land. Huge.
Right. Don't let me forget to go to the impact on the land. I want to talk about that, but keep going.
That progression, it takes a lot of time because it takes a lot of confidence. And that's something that I guess I will very strongly stress with our business and what we've learned with our cover crop customers that we work with. I don't want them to run first. I want them to walk. I don't want 2,000 acres of something done. I want 20 or 40. Start small, because you are going to learn so many things that you're going to get frustrated with and you're going to get deterred by. And to have that on a magnitude of, that size of scale, it's really going to hinder your forward looking there. So I strongly encourage guys, start small. We got a couple of producers right now that, they've grazed cover, they graze the rye in the spring, and it's fun for them. I mean, I've got a couple of guys that, we sit there and we talk about the economics of it. And, I had a guy that did 40 acres this year, and it was their first time doing it. And it was worth about a $10,000 bill to him for a period of 28 days. Just surely the feed cost opportunity compared to what he would have been doing had he not been on the grazing, on the rye.
On 40 acres.
On 40 acres. Yeah. Yep. I mean, because again, back to how much biomass you can grow with this stuff. And it's all different with where you live and in your, your region and whatnot and rainfall. But here it's a use it or lose it kind of deal when it comes to rye in the spring. I mean, you see it at 6-8 inches, you better be having something out there, because before you know it, it's going to be headed out and gone and coarse and whatnot. So like I said, just to walk before we run and see that advantage, and that specific producer, they're planning on doing more next year because they have enough cows to do it with, or cattle to do it with. So he's like, why would I not?
Right. I'll bet he is. That first 40 acres paid okay. Let's do 400.
Right. It makes a lot of sense from a financial economical system, that way. So all in all, I guess, we've ran scenarios where I like to say, John, if we can grow multiple crops in less time, right? Now, when I talk multiple crops, I am not physically talking a crop.
Right. But if biomass is one of the crops, basically, right?
Absolutely. And biomass can translate to whether it's, you're having somebody custom bring cattle into you and generate cash off your biomass, or, you're growing pounds, right? Or you're carrying days or whatever on some cows. But that is a crop to me. I mean, we really look at cover crops and forage crops as a crop. And I look at pounds as a crop. Pounds of beef to me is huge. I mean, that's no different than pulling that bushel of corn off.
Well, and it's no different because somebody will pay you for it, right? That's the that's what it is. You're creating liquidity, right? I am generating something that somebody will pay me money for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's taken us some time to really look at that differently. And that's something, I guess, from a mindset standpoint that I can't stress enough to people and folks in our industry that are thinking of doing these things, or I hear the soil health thing, or I hear the cover crop thing. I'm kind of intrigued, but I don't really want to change. We know the most expensive words are, it's the way we've always done it, right? All I can encourage people is just be open. Just be open to it. You don't have to dive into it, but find people that are doing it, talk with them a little bit, understand the consequences and the benefits of the whole system, right? That's the biggest thing when we're talking. We're talking a system, right?
Correct. Yeah, and that's the change in mindset.
Yeah, this is an entire system. It's an entire mindset shift that it all has to work together. But it's up to you as the business owner and the producer to design that to how you can do it.
Yep, exactly. Want to sharpen your business skills without leaving the ranch? Our Ranch Right webinars cover everything from the financial basics to business strategy and tax prep, all taught by our own ranching and finance experts from the team at Ranch Right. Join us online, ask questions, and get practical tools you can put to work tomorrow. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to receive updates on our next session, and catch up on all of our past webinars by visiting and subscribing to Ranch Right LLC on YouTube. All right. Well, the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up is give us the farmer's perspective from a cropping side. So we've talked about the economics. There are people that argue that, cover crops reduce productivity. There are people that argue that they increase productivity. What do you see in your area? The original purpose of fallowing in a lot of parts of the country was to, reduce transpiration and actually preserve soil moisture. I think your experience with, leaving residual kind of speaks to the opposite of that. But what have you seen?
Well, so up here on the cropping side of things, one big thing that we see is actually we see a lot of assistance with weed control when we have that, specifically. And again, I use cereal rye a lot because as you move north, it's just old trusty. It's hard to screw up a cereal rye cover crop. Now, with cereal rye, it comes with some potential complications, right? I mean, we got to manage our nitrogen. We got to manage some different things depending on what crop is following it. But nonetheless, we've got, I would say, a half a dozen or 10 producers now that have really shaved back their herbicide program costs on the row crop side of things. You talk a herbicide costs, I make some notes right here or whatever, but, anywhere from let's just say a $28 to $40 a pass. We can reduce that or take that out. And I like the way the guys kind of looked at it. I got a couple of them that are like, instead of paying twice for that, we're paying it once because we're, if we come in and drill it with the seed and the drill, just use a number of $32 to $35 is what that's probably going to cost. But they're saving their herbicide pass. So to them, they're net zero, right? I mean, we're implementing something, but we're taking something away. And then arguably with what we're implementing in that cover crop or in that rye, as we spoke before on our previous segment, there's a magnitude things going on with that cover crop. That a chemical is doing one thing. It's stopping your weed pressure. It's halting it. It's slowing it up, whatever the case may be there. But with that cover, there's so many things going on with it. And there's so much potential after it if you choose to utilize it, right? So in our world up here, that's one big thing I can state. I can confidently tell you, we see guys with, a cereal rye crop following a corn crop leading soybeans. We actually see our standability better on those soybeans. And I think that's just from the concept that, soybeans are, they're very photosynthetic driven, right? I mean, they want to grow to the sun. So when they got that rye above them, now they'll grow faster. They'll try to get up and get to that sun. And I will say there's a halfway medium in here, because if we grow them too fast, then we get really spindly stems, right?
Yeah.
We've had that happen to our own stuff because we've left a headed out rye crop grow, and we wanted to play a little bit, I guess, to lack of better terms. But we see that. We see organic matter build. We have seen, from the brassica side of things, we've seen a lot of nitrogen scavenging. Radishes are known for tillage, right? They're the tillage radish or the daikon radish or nitro radish or whatever, but they're meant for tillage. We actually see them really pulling up a lot of nitrogen. And they're, again, in a row crop sense where you're not going to graze them. We don't have any worry about nitrate issues or nothing with cattle. That's a great way to make available nitrate in that top 4 inches or so, when that corn plant's little. So there's a lot of things, John. I mean, we could probably talk for 4 hours on the benefits of what we're seeing. And you made a comment. You were here, you saw it, you saw the driftless region, you saw the hills. I think the easiest and the number one thing that a guy or a business can focus on is erosion control. I mean, that's the easiest thing to talk about when you live in the hills, to slow that water movement down. And truthfully, I mean, we talk about compaction. Well, when we got a bare soil, we got a raindrop falling and it hits that ground and smacks it. If you got a leaf, you don't even need a lot, but even 2 inches, 3 inches of a rye plant there to deflect that and break it up into multiple particles on a very small scale, you reduce that compaction as well. So we don't fight the crust as bad typically, after a hard rain compared to that black soil. A lot of benefits, John. A lot of benefits that come from it.
Excellent. And again, I'm sure one of the concerns is compaction and the mud season. And so do you really just have to have a plan for mud season?
Yeah. The biggest thing is, so let's just talk in a context that everybody can understand. So when you have 10 head in this area, right, and we put 100 head in this area, right, the impact is so much more severe because we're 10xing that hoof traffic in that area, right? So what you got to do is, you can have them out there. It's not a huge deal. You just better make sure you got enough room for what you have out there, right? And make sure that they can move and spread out. And it's interesting to watch these cattle when it is wet, how they do move around and what they're up to. And you can really study what they're doing and how they're acting. And it's interesting because you get a big, heavy rain. When allotted cattle get rained on, they kind of huddle up. But when these cattle are out in this heavy, dense green biomass, pick your poison of what the biomass is, but they stay scattered out because they don't feel, they're not pressured up, right? So, and you're going to have, we commonly have, we call them wreck and correct areas.
Thankfully, you own a drill, so.
Right. Sometimes I wonder if having them drills around doesn't make things maybe even too easy for us, but it's not hard to go out and with a 40-foot machine and get something done pretty fast. But you're going to have them spots, but it's back to the mindset thing with that, John. You're going to have in life, you're going to have road bumps, you're going to have twists and turns and peaks and valleys. You just have to figure out how to navigate those. And we feel confident and comfortable now. In our world, we don't have failures. In our world, we have learning opportunities. I tell my guys, we got back to our business a little bit, I guess, but we got 3 full-time employees now, and 2, we have three little kids that we're raising here, and that's something I instill in my guys all the time is like, if you make a mistake, it's only a mistake if you didn't learn from it. You can get by any of that stuff. A bad day is honestly in the eyes of the beholder. You don't have to have bad days. I mean, there's good and bad, but you can get through them pretty good. And that's something we want to instill in our children too, as they grow up.
Right. Love it. Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap up. Where can people find you? If they're interested in learning more, where do they go?
Yeah. So we got our website is tacattlecompany.com. You can go on there and look and see what we're up to. We're on Facebook. T-A Cattle and Covers LLC. We post on there probably not as frequently as we should, but enough to kind of show what we're up to. I got my personal cell phone, which folks are interested in that. They can email us at tbaracattle.com. tbaracattle@gmail.com. They can email us there, and if they're interested in learning more about what we're doing or interested in something, they're surely welcome to reach out. So
fantastic. All right, great. Well, Amos, I'm really glad for what I've learned from you over the years. Super excited to see what you're building up there, and I'm really intrigued because right now it just feels like a really good time for the cover and forage crop business. There are so many good opportunities around and so many places where, some technology and some knowledge and maybe some generational transfer just sort of really allows an opportunity for this thing to take off and run a little bit.
Yeah. And I guess to leave you on that note, John, I can't stress enough with folks that are interested in stuff like this to just be open to the opportunities, because once you're open to the opportunities they just keep coming. You can't disregard them or turn your shoulder to them. Just be open to them and listen about them and understand how they may positively impact your business.
Yeah, love it. Very good. Amos, thank you very much. I'm very appreciative of our time together. Glad we were able to visit a couple weeks ago at your house, and I look forward to next time. Thanks, bud.
You bet, man. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Ranchnomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.